Good afternoon. It's a little different than saying good evening. We're going to go ahead and open up our board retreat. Before we do, we can stand for a moment of silence and say our pledge just to practice, because that's how we always open up all of our meetings. So let's take a second to stand for a moment of silence. If anybody wants to join me, feel free to do so. We'll say our pledge and it's honorable. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good job. We'll let Mr. Johnson, he's not here, but he'll take roll call for our board retreat. I know it's a non-voting session, but I don't know if we need a roll call, but we'll take one anyway. I think we've got two out right now. That's fine. I think we are recording this, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Not live, but we are recording this.
We'll put it up.
Perfect.
Public to view tomorrow.
Perfect.
There's still some front-row seats available.
Yeah, there's plenty of seats available for anyone that'd like to join us. Unless you're watching this tomorrow. Yeah. If you're watching this tomorrow, there's still probably gonna be plenty of seats. Just nobody else will be here. So we'll go ahead and get that out of the way. So to open up, Dr. Langford, do you want to open up with any comments before we get started?
No, I'm just excited for us to get together. I think we had a great morning kickoff with our school tours. I'm thankful for Mr. Hyde reaching out. We had a good representation from the school board and county commission, and saw great things in Hendersonville and Merrill Hyde, and I'm thankful. I know, and as Mr. Hyde started that, the one thing we used to do this a couple years ago, we know not everybody can make it to every one, or sometimes even any of them, but it's really good to just have an hour or two to walk around and just have the opportunity to talk and get to know each other and see the great things that are going on in our schools. And I think that was good, and we'll continue to do that. I think, I'm excited about today and having the opportunity. I think what I would say is, in what we're doing, there's going to be a lot less formal presentation and a whole lot more conversation today, because I think that's the point of a retreat. We're going to share some of the things that we're going to do after Mr. Daniels, Ms. Hayes, and then just try to get feedback on some long-term vision stuff that we've been working on my team, and then where I think we'll start sharing some of that with you and get feedback from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So what we want to do first is, as you'll see on the agenda, it says the board norming session. So I was talking to Ms. Hayes a little bit. We were trying to think about what did we want to talk about as a board. What was some of the things that we want to focus on. And one of the things that we were talking about is, when you look around the board, I think Ms. Hayes and myself are the only board members that have been here more than 2.5 years. I believe we had some that were elected a little over 2 years ago, and we've got a group that was elected during the last election. And so, we were talking a little bit about how do we want the board to operate? How do we want to run meetings? Yes, there's Robert's rules and all these other things that, we want to try our best to hew to, but how do we want to operate as a board? What are the things that are important to us? I'll say, one of the things that, bothered me a little bit about the last meeting was I looked around and there are a lot of people that had their lights on that I never called on, because of whatever the reasons were. But I'm a big proponent of, as a board, every board member should have the opportunity to speak. And so what does that look like? How do we allow every board member that wants to speak the opportunity to speak, while allowing those that have multiple questions the ability to ask those questions in a way that allows them to ask questions their constituents or themselves have, but the whole group gets to participate in those discussions. So one of the things that we went and looked at was, and I'll say, across the, and I want to preface all this by saying this, one of the things that I get to do in my job is I travel a lot. I've traveled a lot with ServPro for the last 23, 24 years. I've traveled all over the country. And that's, a lot of people are, oh, wow, you travel all the time, and that's great. Most time I'm in a hotel room or a meeting room or an office somewhere. It's not like I'm out sightseeing when I'm visiting all these exotic locations. I can tell you at the inside of the Hilton Garden Inn, the Midway Airport hotel park in Chicago, Illinois looks like. That's about it, right? But sometimes when I travel, I run into a lot of people that are involved with school systems, and so I'm always interested to see what they're doing. Sometimes when you're flipping through channels on the TVs, you run across a public access station that shows like a school board meeting or a commission meeting or whatever they call community leadership groups in different states. And man, I've seen some really dysfunctional boards. Some really dysfunctional boards. We are not one of those boards. And I think, we get frustrated sometimes. We look around and maybe we think that, we're not operating the way that we should or to the best of our ability. And I do think there's some things that we can do to improve. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what is it that we'd like to see in the meetings, how we run the meetings, how we prepare for the meetings, how we operate as a board within this room and within this community. And I want to do that in a way that allows everybody the chance to participate and provide feedback. So what we did is we went out and we looked for different boards that have, what you would call board norms. We looked at TSBA guidelines on board norms, and we tried to compile a list of things that we felt were ideas or ideals or suggestions on how boards should effectively operate, allowing each member of that board the opportunity to fully participate in a way that allowed them to share their opinions, their suggestions, provide feedback, and participate. And I think that's the most important thing, is how do we all have the opportunity to participate together to discuss topics. Sometimes, let's be honest, some of the things we talk about aren't the most exciting things. There's state laws that we just have to pass and there's minimal questions. Other times there's larger topics where we want to dig into those topics in a little bit more detail. And I just want to make sure that we operate in a way that allows us all to feel like we're we are a valuable part of this board and not just someone that's showing up and clicking a box and saying, hey, I was at the board meeting. So those are some things that we want to talk about. These are not the norms right here that I'm saying that we're going to adopt and follow. These are suggestions. I would like us as a board to review these and come up with what we think our suggestions are. And I don't want to get bogged down necessarily in wordsmithing everything and making sure it's exactly right before we move on. I want to work to get the general ideas together, whether that's 6, whether that's 8, that we as a group can agree on, and then come back and provide some feedback. So the way I'd like to do this, again, my vision and my goal with this board is to make sure everybody has the opportunity to participate. And so what I'd like to do is break us up into 3 groups. And since we've got 9 people, it's a pretty simple break. So we'll have Ms. Hayes, Mr. Evans, Mr. Lancaster in one group. We'll stay together right here, and then we'll have Ms. Tucker, Ms. Barnes, and Ms. Brennick together in one group. So what I'd like us to do is just take about 30 minutes or so. And as a group, if we want to sit here as a group, we've got some whiteboard paper. If there's things we want to write on, if you want to write on the back of this paper as you're taking notes. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of come back and provide feedback and let each group kind of provide their suggestions and their ideas. So any questions about that?
We got team names.
What was that?
Oh, yeah.
How long?
I said we were going to have team names.
If you want to come up with the team name, you can come up with the team name. Yeah, that'd be great. You have to present the team name first.
The dream team.
Of course, if we do that, it's probably going to take 20 minutes to come up with the team name and then, 10 to discuss this. But yeah, so let's take about 30 minutes. Again, if we want to kind of move down, adjust a little bit, find a place to get together and talk. And again, I just, this is not a dictatorship, okay? I'm not here to say this is what we have to do. I just want us to think as a board how we want to operate and what we think makes the most sense. So with that, we're going to break up into groups and then we will come back and share. Yes. What is that?
So the piece of paper that he handed you are examples from other places, which I think he said. So don't choose from those. Kind of read those to kind of wrap your brain around it and then write your own.
Yeah, we're about to take
3 to 5.
We're about to take those papers up in a couple of minutes, just so that y'all come up with your own ideas.
The dream team does not need paper.
I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna count to three. When I count to three, I want you to point to the person who you want to be the spokesperson in your group. Ready? You're gonna point to him. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, and you're gonna point to who you wanna talk. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
I got all three pointed before the count.
So who is it up against?
Megan, you won before she got to three.
Who
Andy
got the
started
most
before
points?
she counted.
We all wanted around this way.
You went to the next person.
Dream team.
Dream team.
Let's do it.
You're gonna do it. Okay. Who got the most points right here?
4 points.
Who got the most points? You won. So you get to choose. Who got the most points? Make sure I can. You get to choose who. All right, Ms. Hayes.
Yes, I'm Vanna, this is Pat.
Very nice. What's your team name?
Vanna.
Oh, Dream Team. Dream
I'm
Team.
sorry,
Got it.
we have a team name.
That's kind of like me.
Number one, which we think is foundational, is respect and civility in conducting business as a school board.
Okay. All right, number two.
It didn't have to be word for word, but give something about respect.
Not necessarily number two, but we
Put
just
check
think
by.
everybody ought to have the opportunity to speak on a topic before anybody else speaks on it multiple times. And I'm guilty of this a lot, but as soon as I have an idea, somebody says, like, but just, I know sometimes people like, oh, well, we're gonna talk about this for 3 hours. I'm gonna not bring up my point and then speak on it. So just, if we can like, say, hey, is anybody not supposed to learn something before we go backward?
And I know these are just phrases and kind of topics because we could go on and on. The social media respect, that's respect for the board members, our district personnel, after we've had a meeting, a vote, if we don't go on social media and we start putting anybody down about that.
Okay, number 4 is, it says online discussion item. So basically what this comes to, is you got everybody can send us an email all at once now, which is great for the people because nobody knows who their school board member is. And everybody wants to know, like, I want to see the candidates. They don't want to know. If they send us an email and it's the whole reply all thing, I don't have to hear, avoid reply all. Sometimes I accidentally have done it, but, because if you reply all, then, especially if it's something that we're talking about, like what could be, what calendar option. You reply all and say, I think that like these, the one that everybody knows that you want to go to me, and you have, ideally, we come about calendar. That also would be like a Facebook group or anything else. Anything where somebody might have an opportunity to speak or ask you a question and you respond. If it's on Facebook or you see it in a Facebook group or somebody, I think called out on a Facebook post and say, what is your thought on this? Just send them a private message so that everybody can
Respond
see it.
individually.
Yeah.
Respect and support different roles within the school system, including the director of schools, principals, teachers, any staff, but, and we support them. Social media is a lot in our life these days. So what we say, what comes out of our mouths, either the written word or the spoken word, that we respect and support the different roles in our school system. We are ambassadors for Sumner County Schools.
You have received, I would have.
Okay, that we represent the entire school community and we refuse to represent special interests or partisan politics as we serve in our roles.
Thank
So the
you.
last,
This is something.
like bonus.
Bonus. Of course, the Dream Team.
So somebody said they wasn't the norm, but like,
This is something we want for Christmas.
Okay.
And me and Ms. Hayes are always on the end, and so the same as you get down at that end. If you're on the end, you're either starting to vote or ending the vote. And we just like, hey, it'd be great if we just all voted on like digital.
Let the commission.
Yeah. Because I think it's like keeps you honest on the vote. Because if you start a vote or if you end a vote either way, if you're like, hey, I wanted, I might have gone against it. Everybody else has already voted. It's going to pass. So I'm down there, I'm down here. I'm just going to vote there. But that way it's, kind of keeps you. I was in the Gerald Hyde listening to their class. They talk about data, but how can you assume that data is your data
Hendersonville High School is building a board that will calculate those.
Anyway.
So y'all had seven, yes?
The other one I was suggest, it's not necessarily a norm, but just a question that maybe we could do. I know like with the phone moment, so like when you click your microphone, is there a way that we could show in order? So that would help.
Number one, number two.
Well, it would help, like, so it would help Amy, for instance.
Jeremy can have a notepad.
Well,
there is.
Yeah, okay, so then he knows if you queued up.
So, in answer to both of those questions, the IT guys will, and I will play with it and get back to you, because there is
We do
on
it
the
well.
mic order, it kind of comes down to what they can see it, and figuring out how he can see it may be a little bit complicated. The voting just depends on, us getting down here and kind of playing with the machine, so we'll get back to you both of them.
That's it.
I would say,
Both are in the realm
That's
of
just
possibility.
conversation.
I would say the thing we ran, because when I was sharing the commission, I could see, like, it recorded when people got in the queue. And that was nice, because we had kind of the same thing where if you had already spoken, you know, even if you were higher in the queue, I would try to get the people that hadn't spoken yet. Every once in a while you'd miss, but that was nice. Now, I'll tell you there, with, you know, even though we put it up and all voted at the same time, we had people that requested, like, can you turn it off until the end so nobody can see how anybody else votes? It's like, that's just, at some point, you gotta own your vote.
Yeah.
Alright, so you had seven and,
That was just one of
suggestions.
those.
How many did y'all come up with?
10.
10, did you check any of them off based on what they
Yeah,
said?
I mean, kind of. I think. I mean, respect who's in the queue. I think that was something we all
Sure.
were talking about. We had one work through the director. So it's, I think one of the suggestions on here was, refer complaints and concerns to the director of schools. Now, I'm just reading this one, but that's kind of what we, in a general sense, try to work through the director. And then working to support and promote the school district, and then working to support the academic, physical, social health of our students. So that was maybe one and the same, maybe two. I
Like
don't
the
know.
whole, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's probably what, 3 that were similar? Yes?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So read your other stuff.
Exhibit decorum and respect towards other members in the meeting. So that was one that we had. Accept the will of the board. And that one, I know that's a little general, but in other words, like the board makes a decision, that is the decision, even if you're not on the majority vote. So you have to, accept that. And respect the opinion of other board members. Okay, I think this is what you all had, about different roles in the school system. So that one I marked.
Okay.
Presume positive intent of board members and staff. So there's that one. And then be thoughtful and positive with public comments. Anything you say publicly will be accepted as fact. Is that how you?
Kind of goes along with the social media
Gets
one.
into social media.
Yeah, over here, yep.
Or even email responses, private messaging. If you say something to somebody, they're going to accept that it's fact. And I think that gets back to making sure you work through the director so that you understand the situation, you have the facts.
That's what we got.
Got it. All right, thank you. How many did y'all come up with? It's a little different approach over here. I love it.
We have 7, and then we have a lot of things that feed into those
Sure.
7. A lot of them are duplicates. I think some of the
And I just added because a lot of you said on social media, so everything that we were kind of speaking to, we were thinking of whether it's in person, whether it's on social media, whether it's in private, so I'll let you.
I think one I didn't hear yet was transparency. And again, to go back to the in-person, in private, and social media, be the same person in all 3 places. But then also, if we choose to represent our work on social media, then that has to be accessible to the whole community. So no blocking people, no keeping people from seeing information that you're sharing publicly.
We also trust.
would lead up to, down to the very end of it, for sure. If you feel all those, the transparency, the unity, all that other stuff, then it will lead to a trust that we can all trust each other to do the positive steps that we promise we would do. That's consideration, I think they said that already.
Katie, you wanna put one?
We do efficient, avoid repetition, be concise, prepared to ask questions before the meeting.
Say more about that.
Just if you have a question, go email the director or Jeremy and ask the question. Don't just wait to ask it when you get to the board meeting. It may not be relevant to what we're discussing.
Which increases efficiency.
Yeah.
Which is why
We said alongside that, no convention though, so if you have something you wanna bring to the board meeting, make sure you're connecting with Jeremy or Dr. Langford ahead of time so that, it can be on the agenda or the board can be aware of it, so nobody's surprised when we get to a meeting with something to vote on.
And then one more was the continuous learner. Continue to learn, which I did today.
you did. That's fantastic.
Learned a lot.
Yeah. Are you meaning just about the school system in general?
Well,
each
no, I mean
other?
here as well.
Sure.
Here as well, yeah.
I think all that helps you be prepared, which is under efficiency as well.
So y'all had a lot of commonalities, actually. So I might not get all the words right, but work through the director, positive intent, social media, responsible use, transparency, trust. The one that was really different over here was emailing before the meeting. And so y'all have a lot of commonalities in your 3 pieces of work. So those are the things that we'll pull out and all the different things, and Jeremy will make it like fancy for you, and we'll bring it back in a document that you can give feedback on and then decide to agree to that or strike or change or whatever you want to do. Sound good?
Yes, the idea being we would play with this a little bit, come up with our wordsmithing on it and present it. Let you guys talk about it in the January 6th study session. Now, these are your norms, so if we get it wrong when we word it the first time, we just talk about that and we change it, okay? So, just like we did with the sheets, these were ideas, but the idea is that you guys feel good about what it says. But that would be the next step with this, if everybody's cool with that.
And if I could jump in and say one thing, I appreciate y'all doing this work. Obviously, last meeting, I didn't present myself the way that I would like to, so I apologize to the board. I want to work in the same way to follow the same norms and expectations because, at the end of the day, we all want what's best for kids and what's best for each community. So I'm committed to do the same thing. I apologize for the last meeting.
And one last thing, everybody leave their notes where we can get to them so that we can
Oh,
work.
yeah, I'll put-
Don't take your notes with
You
you.
gonna copy our stuff?
Don't take your notes with you. I think 6 to 8 norms is probably good. You don't want a laundry list of where you can't remember what you agreed to. And so if you guys are good with that, we'll work within those numbers.
To just back that up, something that I'm interested in us pursuing or maybe looking into from a technology AI perspective, there is something that we've used with the state tourism office where whenever we have a meeting, at the end of it, that meeting that is videoed like our meetings, we get immediately within 3 to 5 minutes a recap and summary of that meeting through AI with key points. And from our perspective, I feel like that'd be very beneficial for us as the board because I might forget something that came
Like
up. But
honorary-
it's almost like a
honorary,
report. But yeah, there is, I can't remember the name of it. I think it's called OWL.
Or Otter.
Otter, that's the one. That it gives you that report, and I think that'd be very beneficial. I mean, a couple of us write really well-received reports on Facebook, but I think having that information when people ask questions about something would be, it's almost immediate. So
Yeah.
something I think we should pursue.
Yeah.
I was gonna just ask, when you have your pretty fancy thing that we all vote on, can that be the background of our computers? That's always up for us to remember.
So we're going to play with it and see what Board Docs has a function in it that lets you vote. It's been a long time since I've seen it demoed, and so that's one of the things that IT and I want to play with and see what it actually looks like and functions like. But at the time, we had board members that were resistant to the idea, and so that's why we do it the way we do it now. But we're just going to look at it and see, does it work? Does it function the way we want it to? Does it show, hey, this is the motion you're voting on? And we'll get back to you.
One other thing I do want to mention is just, from a board standpoint, from an agenda standpoint, we've operated a little bit differently since the new board members have come on. And one of the things, typically, the way our meetings are set up is you have a voting session, which is where you're taking a specific action on items that you've discussed. Your study session is typically where you have, your conversations about, specific subjects or actions or, policies, or things going on in the school system. Because we've got so many new board members, one of the things that we did is we took some of those discussions that are typically geared more towards a study session, and we've added those in under the executive session so that we can provide you with more information. One of the pieces of feedback we always got, going back years ago was, the board meetings, the voting sessions are always pretty quick. A lot of times the reason they were quick is because you'd already talked a lot about what was on the, on the voting session through study sessions. So, we're gonna continue to look at that. I imagine we'll still continue to have some conversation type pieces during our voting sessions, but typically, and this is something that we were talking about in our group, is if there's something that you want to talk about, if you go through the director first, through Jeremy first, through staff first, then if it's something that applies to the entire board or the school system that we need to discuss as a whole, it would then roll into a study session. And then if there's a policy or an action we need to take, that's when it would roll into a voting session. So that's typically how it's supposed to work. And again, with new board members, we're trying to do our best to make sure we're educating you on the way the system works, throughout our meetings as well. So if we make some adjustments, we move into the new year, it's not because we're not trying to educate you or don't care about you. We want to make sure that we're covering the topics that you want us to focus on. So, all right, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Langford.
Dr. Lang.
Yeah, I'm gonna we're gonna do a little bit of a transition before I jump in and start talking about some big picture things. One of the things that we celebrate is we're a very innovative school district. I had the opportunity last week to speak nationally on a webinar about Course Mojo that we are piloting in 6th grade this year. And it's amazing because I haven't been able to look at it in about a month and a half. And the iterations and the growth in the product are really pretty amazing. And it has our 6th grade ELA curriculum, and it provides support for students and teachers. So I'm going to let Ms. Skinner explain a little bit and then introduce. We're going to actually do a lesson. I didn't want to tell you all that ahead of time, but we're going to do a 6th grade ELA lesson. Yeah, okay, yeah. Hey, you got AI support, so don't worry.
So I can see that their first introduction here is what is Course Mojo, so I don't want to steal their thunder, but what I do want to say is that they have really jumped into this work and are learning everything they can about it for the benefit of their students and themselves, and it's pretty amazing to watch. And so we are very excited for you to tiptoe into this Course Mojo so you can get a sneak peek of what these ladies do during ELA.
Do you want to introduce them, Frank?
I'm sorry.
I gave it to you.
So, joining us today.
We have our great 6th grade ELA team from Hawkins Middle School.
Yes. I'm Kathy Fox, and this is my partner.
Morgan Sanders.
And we just are honored to be here today to show you this program. We have been very excited about it from day one. It is an ongoing process. We feel like we're really part of the ground zero and building this program because the people at Course Mojo are taking a lot of feedback from us. They're constantly asking us for feedback, and we're giving them very honest feedback. And next thing you know, they've taken our feedback and they've added it to the program. So it's a work in progress, and it's just really exciting to share. Like 37 years or something. Yeah.
This is my 5th year, and I started job embedded in the COVID year, so
Yes.
it's been a fun start.
So yes.
Dream team.
That's right.
Yes. Thank you very much. So we'll go to this slide. We're just going to give you a real quick background piece on what Mojo is, and then we're going to provide you with an activity where you will play as the student. However, you're also going to see what teachers can do on our end as well. So kind of from both perspectives. So we see here that Mojo is an AI-powered teaching assistant that provides individual and small group interactive practice and feedback. You are going to see that in action today. So we'll go on to number 2. The goal is to prepare students for an in-class, inclusive class discussion, because in Wit and Wisdom, students will generally have a targeted text that they have to read, and they are expected to come to class with that information from the text. They should have a pretty clear understanding or basic comprehension of a text. That's hurdle number 1 for us, because a lot of them come in with a different level of understanding, and it can be hard for us to move into a Wit and Wisdom lesson where now we take that core text and we now have to analyze it deeply. And we're, of course, working on our course standards to get them to a level of analysis that will help them be successful. So unless all students have this baseline for that activity, we're struggling, because we've got this kid over here who understands, this one who has no clue, this one who hasn't done the reading. So what Course Mojo then is that middle piece. And it kind of allows us to get to a place where we can assess how students are doing and then move forward with a deeper analysis of the text. So
one thing I wanted to add as well is that students who come in with the knowledge before, if they did go home and do the reading, it's challenging the students that do have an understanding. So not only is it getting everyone to a baseline, but it's also challenging the more accelerated students to think deeper about the text so that they can participate on a different level, whereas other students might have not done the reading and don't have any understanding of the concepts in the text for us to have a discussion. Now they're able to participate as well. So it's challenging the ones that did do the reading and getting the others to a baseline so that they can participate and be successful as well. Okay, so Course Mojo offers 3 different types of activities. So the first activity that we have is called a GIST activity. This is just literal comprehension of a certain assigned piece of the text. So if the students had to read chapter 2 and chapter 3, it's going to assess them on chapter 2 and chapter 3, asking basic questions about literal understanding of the text. The next activity, our personal favorite, is the close read activity. So they're actually given an excerpt of the text. They have to then analyze, they're highlighting, they're finding text evidence, they're really interacting with a certain piece of text instead of assessing basic comprehension. The final activity is the writing, which supports students in practicing written responses. Mojo's been fantastic in taking our feedback as far as how to structure written responses. So it's still a work in progress, but we are seeing a lot of improvements with that activity as well, and encouraging students to give full, thorough written responses in the 2-seek format that Wit and Wisdom expects as well. Again, that's still a work in progress. It's not perfect, but we are definitely seeing the improvements and are loving the changes that they're making as we're giving them the feedback.
So the next slide here talks about the different support for teachers. So when we do this, when you guys engage in the activity, we are going to show you from our perspective, and you'll be able to see on the screen the teacher dashboard, what the students, you'll be doing what the students are doing, and then you'll see what the teacher might be doing during that time, because it's important that we keep track of how the students are doing on this, as they're all going to be moving through at different levels. So there's a teacher's guide, which Ms. Sanders is passing out to everyone now, and when we get into the activity, we're going to encourage you to use the teacher's guide to play around with trying to get an answer that's going to meet the criteria, and then maybe put something like an I don't know, or something way off base, so that you can see how the AI then redirects you, okay? We will be able to, well, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do this, but in theory, in our classroom, we can pull up student transcripts of everything that they're doing, both in the moment, so we can see individual students, what their answers are, and what Mojo is saying back to them. There is also a dashboard, and how can we get that up? Yeah. Yes. So once everybody logs in, the teacher has a dashboard on their end, and you see the names, so there'll be names, and all of your names are going to be there, and then there's going to be colored dots, and the colored dots are a quick representation of how well you're doing. So if we see a solid blue dot, that means you are right on track. You are doing a great job. If we see a donut, which a blue with a little dot in the middle, that means, ooh, you're close, but you're not hitting maybe one of those criteria that you're seeing on the teacher's guide. If we get to a yellow, that is cause for concern. Like you have some misunderstandings, you're pretty good, but you're not quite there yet. And so Mojo is going to dig deeper and try to get you to get to the point where you're making mastery of those criterias. Mojo is not going to spend the whole day with you on one question. He or she, whatever it is, he's gonna move on. Okay, so eventually there will be a colored dot on the screen, and that's gonna be how you did on that question, and it's gonna move you on to the next one. There are some other colors in there, red, orange, that represents maybe a student that used foul language or something that they shouldn't have said. So there's a flag for all of that. And then also the pause. The pause is, I'm seeing everyone is on yellow on this question. People are just really struggling, misunderstandings. So we can pause and stop everyone real time. You won't be able to continue, and we will have a whole class discussion and try to get everybody on the same page.
One thing we love about the dashboard, so initially when we started using this program, we didn't show students the dashboard. It felt like they were seeing their grade almost and putting it on display for everyone. Students started to ask for their progress. They wanted to know. That's one thing Mojo will not do, is necessarily say that's incorrect. Mojo's just going to ask you in a different way until Mojo's just done asking you, and then you're moving on to the next question. So we tried putting the dots on the board and just explained to them, this is not your grade. This is an opportunity for you to be accountable for your own learning and say, oh, okay, I got a yellow. Let me figure out what I'm missing here. How can I go back and change this? We also explained to them that this is something that we can see, and maybe as teachers we don't agree with the dot that Mojo gave to you, and we can change that as well. So it's just a cool real-time way for them to see their progress. Now every time that we do this activity, they ask, can you put the dots on the board? Can you put the dots on the board? That helps them just be accountable. They want to be accountable for their own learning. They want to know how they're doing, if they're getting it right and if they're getting it wrong. They also kind of misunderstand sometimes that when Mojo asks them a question to go a little bit deeper, they're starting to feel like they're getting it wrong, even though it's not wrong. It's just following up a question with a question. So those are just some things that we're having to clarify for students. You might experience that on your end today when you do your own activity. It doesn't mean that it's the wrong answer, but rather we're going to follow up the question with the question to think about this a little bit further.
Okay, so now we are ready for...
Chairman Daniels. Chairman. I have
Yes.
a question, may I?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hayes.
Ladies, can I ask what you're talking about? You actually see this on a screen. So it's every student, and the dots represent a color. So when you see the child that is struggling, or whatever, do you individually, can you at that point
Yes.
go over to that child,
Yes.
prompt them?
We're engaging individually with students.
Yes.
We can see real time how they're doing, or we can see the whole class is struggling, then we can stop everybody. So yes, this allows us to give that immediate feedback to students before they're at a frustration level. Like we are right there, and it's because of the dashboard.
And you can kind of see as well, like if the rest of the class is on question 3 and you still have a student on question 1, maybe they haven't even answered the question yet. Maybe they're already looking at the question and they're frustrated. Well, I don't know what this word means. I don't know how to do this. So that gives us an opportunity. Usually those are the silent ones that could be easily missed because they're not making a lot of noise, but they're not answering the question either because they're confused. And so now we can see that it's been more than 3 minutes since they've answered the question. The rest of the class is here. Let me go and figure out what's going on with this. So it's been a great tool for that, an excellent assessment tool to figure out even just having conversations that maybe otherwise we wouldn't have. The same students love to answer the questions. When we're doing wit and wisdom and text-dependent questions, the same ones, they always want to give the responses. But this has allowed us an opportunity to maybe have conversations with students that wouldn't normally ask questions because we're seeing that they have questions without them having to ask. Yeah. Okay, so on your computers, you should be able to log in. I think that you can log in with your Microsoft. I think that's what we came up with, your Sumner Schools. So go ahead and log in, and your activity is going to come up.
So on the left side is your text that you're going to be engaging with Mojo about. It is a lovely poem by Langston Hughes,
And then we should the
Mother
dots on
to
the board.
Son. We love this poem. We do teach this in our ELA classrooms.
We're also going to display the dots for you all, so the dashboard, so you guys can see if you were the teacher of this class, what it would look like as you all are answering questions. So if you're a student viewing the dashboard, you'll get to experience that as well. On your teacher guide, there are the key points that it's looking for, what Mojo is looking for in the response. So we would encourage you to give a correct response, give the correct answer, but also give an incorrect answer as well, just to see how the dots translate on the dashboard.
So, and on your teacher's guide, I'm going to send you to this back of the first page down to where it says pair work questions. These should be the questions that you're going to be asked by Mojo.
Are we supposed to sign in something?
With your Microsoft, it should have prompted you to sign in with Microsoft, yeah.
I scanned the
Just use your
QR
summer
code.
schools.
Oh, okay, that should still
It
be.
didn't
It'll
really
still
help.
ask you to
It won't-
sign in though.
Okay, yeah, it wouldn't work, but I'll
Okay.
try this one.
Tried to go back and miss it. What's that look like?
Yeah, right now.
Just 1 second. We're gonna put them back on that last line of the slideshow. So that and then we'll, once we get some folks logged in, then we'll switch over to that.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Okay, nobody's logged. Yeah. There we are.
Hey, Chris.
Okay, we're good.
Chris,
Yep, we got.
I remember my password.
All right, good job. Did you get in?
I did.
Yep.
Overachiever.
Gals and boys, good luck. If you don't remember, just scoot over next to your name.
Yeah.
Okay, we got Mr. Evans, Mr. Gramsby, Mr. Daniels. Mr. Brown.
I think that'd probably be okay, as long as you've got as long as you've got a Google account or a Microsoft account you can authenticate to, it's probably okay.
Okay, good.
Is it working now?
I'm looking to see if I
Be an overachiever.
Okay.
So you can see the dashboard up here. The first red dot just tells us that you are starting that question, so it's not a problem to be on red.
So from your, just from your side right now, you can see my responses.
So yeah, so what we could see, if we clicked on one of the dots, so
Gotcha.
click on, we can. Yeah, so if he clicks on that dot, then we can see like a quick transcript for just that question. But we also have the ability to print or email an entire transcript of the entire assignment. I had to do that for a student the other day for a parent because they put L as every answer, just the letter.
What's at the end of the .com on the Course Mojo? The URL?
It's activity. Yeah, aia.coursemojo.com/activity. And then it will ask for the code.
It said log in failed, using that permission to access it. Is it domain
Why
based?
don't we just scoot together and work together, maybe?
Is this, are you smarter than a middle schooler?
I tried a personal Gmail, that's not gonna work, is it?
It might, yeah.
We'll try yours.
Okay, I'm gonna try this one. I mean, it says, I logged in and it says I don't have permission through my personal Gmail.
Oh.
Because you're not in the Sumner County network.
So it does have to be something.
So it's just gonna be sent through Sumner County.
Let's get back in teams.
Did it let you guys log in with Microsoft? Is that the Sumner School? Yeah. I'm using
I just sent it back to you.
either that or I can email a link if that's easier.
What's the class code?
It is U
Capital.
yeah, all capitals X E C K.
It's down here at the bottom of the screen. If you need the class code, it's down here on the bottom of the screen right there. UXDCKD.
In?
It should prompt you for a passcode when you go in, when you enter in. That's it. Sixth graders are way faster.
Yeah. It's seamless with our Sumner K-12
Yeah.
Gmail address.
We got it preloaded.
It's really,
The iPad's
real
got
fast.
tremendous-
How soon will I show this in sixth grade?
How soon do we
Yes, in the fall.
at the beginning of the school year?
Yeah.
We did it pretty quickly this year because we had a little bit of summer training, so we piloted it pretty quick, like lesson 2 of Wit and Wisdom.
The reason why I asked, my wife teaches fifth grade
Yeah.
specifically.
Microsoft, I love
Yeah.
you with mine.
I was showing this in the beginning, but especially when you come back from spring break in the spring. This would be awesome for
Yeah.
them to
Yeah.
just be exposed to, that exposure to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it's fifth grade, but still, it just so
Oh, yeah.
they come back in the fall.
Yeah.
It's a learning
amazing.
process for sure. We spend a good bit of time at the beginning of the year just setting expectation and teaching the program. And we were still learning, as well. But it's been cool to kind of learn alongside them and hear their feedback so that we can give the feedback and see how we can make it work for everyone. It's been cool.
And also, one thing that we encourage, that we do often, is these activities are not just to be independent student activities. They also work very well as a cooperative learning activity, partners, not so much groups, but partners, and for us, that's what we we like to hear, we might put two students of the similar ability together, and then they are each answering their own mojo. However, they're giving each other some feedback on what they think the answer should be. And that's been great too.
Up there on that screen so you can see your dots changes.
Yes, he's gonna need to scroll up a little bit
Scroll
so that
down
we can
just
see
there we go.
all of it.
Yes. Perfect.
Yep.
So this enables
Yeah, you just click the continue.
kids at different levels to have like, you really can challenge a kid that really gets it.
Yes.
But at the same time, the kid that's struggling, it stays at that, hey, we're gonna get you here.
Yeah.
But if you're like rocking through it,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
keep, cause it's not stopping.
Yeah,
Hey,
it
I
won't
got
stop.
it.
No, it keeps going. And so our accelerated kids, at first are like, well, wait, I got it right. And so it takes them a little bit of a minute to understand that no, Mojo is helping you analyze deeper and to get a stronger understanding of text rather than, I got it right, I get to move on. And hopefully this will grow our advanced kids quickly too.
Line readers that means
I think that's what we said in our list. Yeah. The advanced kids.
Can we click on one of the like blue with the white dot in the middle? I wanted to just point out as well that at the top it will say partial understanding. This will then tell you which piece of the criteria they are missing. So when you have the conversation with the student and they say, well, I put this was the right answer, you're right, you did, but there was a second part of the question that we missed. So let's talk about that second piece of the criteria that you didn't include in your answer so that they can make that change. But that's been very helpful as well to kind of see specifically what Mojo is looking for and how we can help them be successful for each of these questions. Another feature I wanted to mention while you guys are playing around with it, if you highlight a word, for example, crystal. If you highlight that word, there's a look up word option. It'll give the students a quick definition of that specific word. So it'll give all of the dictionary definitions. It's their job to figure out how it's being used, but that's another new feature that we found to be pretty helpful.
So some of them have like a little star. And sometimes, what's the difference between the little star and the AI response? And sometimes it's like a green, a red, and a blue flag.
Can I look at, because we suggested that
Did I break
the
into it?
team, I can come around with you, do you mind? Because we suggested that the team give the dot feedback
I just didn't know
to
that.
students, so that we can always.
Feel like I just
Oh, that's
That
just
makes
a,
both sides.
just, no, that's just for fun. Those are like little emojis. There's nothing but the little emojis.
A couple of other really cool features. There's a read aloud feature. So if you hit the play button at the top, it will read the text. There's also a play button if you kind of just put your cursor next to the question, it'll read the questions. In the settings in the bottom left, there's translations as well. So students, perhaps EL students, they can change to a Spanish translation and it will translate it. It won't read aloud in Spanish just yet, but it will put the Spanish translation on the screen for the student to read. I have a student who has a seeing disability, and so he turns the font all the way up. That's another feature from Course Mojo as well, which has been helpful in classes. Yeah, it's been cool.
It's also helpful for some teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If y'all have questions that you would like to ask, we have about 3 minutes that you can ask these amazing teachers if you have anything that came to mind as you were working in this program.
So is this are all sixth grade using this, or just you guys are piloting it, or how's that?
There are just a few schools. How many schools?
There's six schools, and all of the sixth grade ELA teachers in those 6 schools are piloting the program. Part of it is they're building it to the liking of Sumner County. So as they mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they're taking their feedback and will make it more teacher user friendly and give them more information about what students know. And so as soon as they give them that direct feedback, they're going back into the program and making those adjustments.
For instance, like at the start of the year, there was some pushback from teachers because it'll help you write a thesis statement.
And a paper. And there was a lot of feedback from the start because if you've ever used ChatGPT, for instance, it can't spell. Its grammar's poor. So at the start, Course Mojo struggled with that. But over the course of the year, they've improved it, and it does spelling and grammar significantly better over the course of the year. This is a slow build. You know, they're not monetizing this as quickly as they could because they're going slow to get it right. So all they're doing right now is 6th grade wit and wisdom. They'll plan to expand that because, you know, you can see the use of this. Like if we could get this for every grade, we'd have it right now.
What I see is it's like, you know, if you got kids that read, you know, and this is always like when I would take the ACT test or anything, like there's some passages you read, and yeah, I know what you're talking about. I you know, for example, if it's a passage that talks about anything like farm related, or, you know, I've got that experience. I kind of know what that life is like a little bit. But a kid that grows up, you know, in Nashville or in a suburban area has never been outside that, like, they don't know certain aspects. Like, so I can see where you instead of having to spend a lot of time, hey, I don't understand what this is talking about. They can just, you know, this focuses on that. You don't have to stop a lesson with 20 kids and explain to one kid or 2 kids that don't understand different little pieces of a passage because they don't have that background.
Yes, it's very individualized for these students. It's like intervention in real time. Like it meets every single kid where they are at that moment and then pushes them forward.
So does it, I guess in theory in the future, or maybe it's doing it now, but would it take the standard that was being required or for that lesson, for whatever you guys were, like, I don't know if this is metaphor or whatever the state standard is, would it make sure that every student going through those pieces as the baseline or the bottom, you know, here's what you got to do to get green or whatever the focus is. So they're kind of
Go ahead.
So it won't, are you asking if they specifically are going to get, like, for this standard feedback that we get to keep up with? Is that what you're asking?
I guess what I'm saying is Course Mojo working with our state standards?
Okay. Yes.
For
So
the
it's
rest of
all
the
directly aligned with Wit and Wisdom.
Okay.
So it is taking the Wit and Wisdom questions and content and creating these assignments based on each Wit and Wisdom lesson. It's broken down per lesson in Wit and Wisdom. So some lessons might have a close read, a writing, and a gist. Some lessons might just have a gist activity. Some just might have a close read. But all are directly aligned with the Wit and Wisdom curriculum.
Which are aligned to the standards.
Yes.
So each lesson has a direct
Well-
standard that we are teaching.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see with it, one of the things that Frankie and I challenged Course Mojo with early on when we started back in August was, maybe even before that, maybe it was back in the spring, to not replicate just the Wit and Wisdom worksheets, because Wit and Wisdom created worksheets because it's the only thing they could run to scale. What we wanted is, like, the whole beauty of AI is it lets kids move at their own pace, get help when they need extra, but move on if they're moving faster. And so they're really kind of thinking about this in a four-dimensional way, so they can take what's a strong curriculum and make it stronger by not being bogged down into that. Because if you can solve the problem in 5 minutes, then you don't need to spend 20 minutes. I think to the intervention, what I think is great is there have been a generation of kids that learned if you sat there quietly, you could coast through school. And if a teacher would come to you, I mean, if you've been a teacher, when you walk in, you'd say, "How are you doing?" And they'd say, "I'm great." "Are you struggling?" "Nope, I'm good." And then you don't find out until a week or two later, and then you don't know what led to their struggle.
I think another benefit, and the young lady from Portland West, as a job embedded teacher, shared with you all a couple weeks ago here at the board meeting. She said that Course Mojo, she actually said it in our meeting, had helped her realize how to craft questions for different levels of learner in her class as a new teacher. So you probably can see that just interacting very briefly, how that would help a brand new educator.
Yeah, I did the whole thing as if I was my roommate and best friend in college who's dyslexic, and it helped every time. Like, it would prompt me like, "Hey, like that's like spell it this way," or it didn't do it for me, but I tried to do it in the way that Jay would have done it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool to see it. You know, I know for him, like all through college, it was so hard for him because everything started being online, and he would mistype and not misspell, but it never made sense. So for it to work through it with me as I acted as if I was him, that was pretty cool.
My student that receives accommodations for her vision, he struggles greatly. Like it is a real struggle for him, and so most words that he spells are misspelled. I don't believe that it's because he can't spell them, but the keyboard, just seeing the keyboard and the screen is really challenging for him. And Mojo is able to work through those spelling errors and mistakes and still can understand what he's trying to say. He does very well on these different activities. He just struggles with spelling because he has a hard time seeing the keyboard. So I really like that it takes a common struggle amongst all students. Just spelling is hard for them in general, and it's able to see past that to really assess the knowledge of the content, whatever that activity might look like, whether it's writing or a close read or a gist. It's able to figure out where they're at in terms of the content, which is really important.
I think a powerful thing, Ms. Skinner's pushed, as long as I've known her with any platform that we've used, and I want to state this again, because sometimes what you see is this is not to replace the teacher. This is to optimize the work of the teacher so that the teacher can focus, because if you click on those dots, she showed you a little bit ago, you can see specifically, like it pinpoints. So like, let's say that you can't, ideally we'll get to it in class during Tier 1 instruction, but let's say you don't, whoever's doing the intervention doesn't have to spend 15, 20 minutes assessing, or sometimes, we'll put 5 or 10 kids in an intervention class and we just basically reteach the same skills. Well, not every kid is the same place. This lets us be way more effective and efficient in our work. All right.
I appreciate you guys coming out and doing this for us. We asked them on Friday, so they prepared their.
You good? Hey, seriously, Morgan, Kathy, thank you so much. And I'll just say this, they jumped in on this in July. This was something that kind of fell into our laps as a gift, and they've jumped in, and we've learned, this has been, from the start, a learning thing for everybody, so we continue with this next year. We'll have a lot better understanding how to support principals, how to support teachers, how to support students, and the product is just getting better. A group of us went to an AI conference in the spring, and we saw 300 different vendors most of whom were doing something literacy based. Almost all of those things were gimmicky. They're hoping to get bought up by one of the big publishing houses to get integrated into their suite. Course Mojo is going a completely different way that I think, this is what I was saying about Skinner earlier, is not something that does the work for you. So it's not a chat GPT, hey, write a letter of recommendation, write a paper. It's teaching kids and it's helping the teacher maximize their effectiveness.
Sure is.
Mr. Lancaster?
Yeah, I've got a 5th grader, and I've got a 9th grader, and I've gone through all the IXLs and stuff like that, and I can see this helping so much in those reading skills that that my kids struggle with. And I think a lot of people will see our scores in ELA and say, well, our kids aren't reading at grade level, and I'm like, you got to know what's in that score, because I'll take that IXL stuff, or with her, and I'm going through, and it's like, what are the 2 main points, or what is the main idea?
It's a blunt tool.
Yeah, and it's like you read, and you're like, that's that one, but it also could be that one, and it's just the way the questions and answers that are getting them ready for the testing are very complicated, and sometimes there are 2 answers that both sound good. One's a little bit better, but if this, I would love to see, like, and you guys might have experience with this, but like going through a couple of examples with the AI on, and then going through one where it's, like, here's the next one where it's off, and you're now doing it, just to see, like, how are they grasping, like, teaching them that piece of, or is the computer or is the AI recognizing what that child or what that student is missing? Like,
So when we as teachers click on one of those dots on our dashboard, it will tell us the direct conversation between Mojo and that child. And there's also a note at the top that tells us what their misconception is. Like if they are missing one of the criteria on the teacher's guide, then as a teacher, we look at their answer, we might make a note, look at our teacher's guide here, and then we help the child understand what criteria they're missing. Also, Course Mojo is working on adding in multiple choice questions to help with some of the test format issues that come up with this answer is a distractor, this choice is pretty close, but this one is better. So it will be adding some of those activities as well, or some of those question types.
yeah, because when we do, I think the one thing like that I could see this helping more than like IXL or something like that is like when you get the wrong answer with IXL, it brings up this whole big paragraph.
Yeah, which they don't read.
And if you don't read it, or if it doesn't prompt you to look at, this, I can see this saying, hey, look, let's go back here.
It makes them continue.
And actually think about what they,
Yeah.
think about why they failed on that particular question.
It's actually been really cool to hear from parents as well who are doing this at home with their student. It's so user friendly that they're able to say, okay, no, it's asking you to look on page 46, so let's go together to page 46. Let's find the text evidence. That's not what the question's asking. So they're having those conversations at home too, which has been really cool. I didn't think of the parent buy-in initially when we started doing this, but it's opened conversations about the content they're learning in class at home too. And truly from some parents I wouldn't have expected, and so it's been phenomenal to watch how involved families are in this program as well, because it's not something that's challenging to use. Once you're in it and you're using it and you're communicating with Mojo, it's great for the parents to be able to have those conversations with their students too, and it's been really cool to see.
It would help me out, like say with IXL, 'cause like
I think
sometimes me and my daughter have fights over, and both of them we've had fights over, it's like, which one do you think it is? I always tell them to tell me what they think it is, and I'll say, no, I think it's C, and they're like, no, it's A.
Well,
when
I
I'm
think
right, that's fine, but when I'm wrong, Lord, it's like the end of the world that they knew it and they chose what I said.
It's funny.
So,
I think we'll close with, I hope you heard that it still takes these amazing ladies to evaluate student work, but provides them with an efficiency that they can get to everyone in their classroom. So we promote human interactions, and they are a great example of how that works in the classroom. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Real quick, how many schools are we piloting this at right now?
6.
6. And so when we were at Hunter on Thursday, was it Thursday last week? Is that when we were at Hunter?
Mhm.
That, I'm
I think so.
confused. It's the holiday season. I don't
Yeah.
even know what day it is most nights.
We were there on a Thursday.
Yeah, so on Thursday, one of the classes was
No,
using
Knox Dawes.
Oh, Knox Dawes. I'm sorry, yeah, Knox Dawes. Sorry, wrong school.
Yes.
But they were using Mojo, correct, in one of the classrooms?
They were.
Yes,
So,
they were.
and I do think, I was always really good at English, and my kids, my younger 3 are terrible at English. As far as, I say terrible, that it's usually their lowest grade. I mean, you're like high 80s, which to them makes them think that they're terrible, and it's really not, right? But the part they understand with is you look at what books they read, and you hear people say, well, they're not literate, they don't read to grade, but they're actually reading books from a word standpoint that are beyond their grade, right? But what the test is measuring, it's measuring the understanding, and I think this really helps. And I like how it focuses on one section at a time, because I think the biggest problem with literacy today is the way we learn is we're so quick to look at bite-sized pieces that when we're asked to read something in its entirety and then go back and pick and choose what it is we're focusing on, it does get confusing. By focusing on one specific area or one specific topic, it helps them zoom in a little bit more. And hopefully I would expect to see, when our test scores, we start to see some of that improvement, because it's that comprehension that it's testing, not necessarily whether you can read the words that are on the page.
Yeah, and I think, and to Mr. Lancaster's point too, the testing industry is scared to death of this technology. Because if you think about why our kids score lower on reading, it's because like Louisiana, because they have one English curriculum for the entire state, they started piloting before COVID and they got away from it, where they would do what they call warm reads, where basically like kids would read about things they were studying. So everybody has a level playing field. There's a classic study called the baseball study, and it shows that they gave a group of kids a reading about baseball, and they grouped them into 4 categories: kids that were strong readers that played baseball, kids that were strong readers that didn't play baseball, kids that were weaker readers that played baseball, and kids that were weaker readers that hadn't played baseball. The number 1 scoring group, of course, were kids that were strong readers that played baseball. Second group was slower readers or less effective readers that played baseball, because they had a knowledge of the game of baseball. So if you think about what happens on a state test, they're studying like the Great Depression in one of their modules, right? So their kids know everything about the Great Depression, or 3rd grade they're studying space, or 4th grade the heart. They have all this deep content knowledge, but then they go to take their test and it's a reading on the Aleutian Indians. And some kids don't, they've never been to Alaska. So kids score higher based on their exposure, their words at home, things like that. Where this levels the playing field, and Course Mojo is going to do this next year, is they're embedding benchmark style prompts and questions into the questions that y'all just did, and they can use predictive analytics to tell where you're struggling with reading, but also to predict what your literacy level is. And it's connected, it's fair because it's actually based on stuff that you know. Now I think it begs a question, and when we get to another part in a little bit, it begs a question that there's no research on this yet because it's new. I would argue that we have shifted as a society from books to devices, and because of that, the way our brains function has changed. So what I think we see a lot of kids struggle with is our kids decode words better now than they ever have in the history of Sumner County schools, at least since before the 70s, or at least since the 70s. But what they struggle with is, and Mr. Lancaster, you were hitting this a minute ago, they have a set of skills, but if you give them a text that they're not familiar with, how do they use those? What the literature and education is bending more towards now is we have to work on retrieval, because like where we used to have to go to an encyclopedia or 2 or 3 different books, and then we had to synthesize it. Kids increasingly get on here, as do adults, and hop on AI, or even if you use Google, it's using AI now, giving you a summary at the top. It synthesizes everything for you. So we're losing as a society that ability to synthesize information, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out how to teach and train kids on. But what I know is we've got great ones doing it, so thank y'all so much.
Mr. King. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So the end of class tests, are they Pearson that's putting those out?
Are you talking about
The end of class ELA tests. So
you mean like the state test, TN Ready?
well, Teen Ready, but like because I guess sixth grade, do they take the Teen Ready for EL? Okay,
Yeah, they
so,
take our TCAP.
Okay, so TCAP. I'm sorry. So are those distributed by Pearson?
Yeah, Pearson does those.
Okay. So is this curriculum? What we're doing here? How are we avoiding that when they get to the test and then there's like what you said, the elution, or what was it? You said that
Yeah.
there's a whole other topic that they never covered. So how are we kind of combating that?
I think you have to build the skill of kids to do close reads and things like that. So I think what this product does is it gives them, it's going beyond just where our curriculum is, because it's helping them build the strength and the resilience to do those type things. Where before, I mean, Witten, like we do a benchmark through, I can't remember the name of it now, Mastery Connect. And, that's not affiliated with our curriculum or any curriculum, but it's predictive. It's about 93% predictive of how kids do on TN Ready. And so it gives teachers feedback on specifically where kids are struggling.
And all those pieces that we use to prepare students are all aligned to Tennessee standards, all of them.
One more question, or one more, I don't know, question. I think this is cool. So, I guess we all kind of came in this passage and this as newbies that have signed in. So a student, like every time they log in, does it kind of custom start the kid kind of where they know that per kid? For example, yeah. Does it kind of, is every
Does it
lesson start at
recognize
the
a
bottom and you
student?
have to work your way up, or does it say, all right, we know this child's kind of already at this level, or?
From what I notice right now is it assesses that pretty quickly within the first question.
Okay.
And I don't think, although I'm not going to speak to this for sure, I don't think it really does to keep track of the data of each child. I think that it addresses their misunderstandings within that one text. And also I would add too that students are becoming much better, in my classroom anyway, dissecting what the question is asking. And that sometimes is the problem too with testing, is what is the question literally asking you? And it's causing them to slow down, look at the question for maybe a second or two longer so that they can answer all the parts of the question. And will oftentimes miss those key questions on a TN Ready or benchmark because they did not understand what the question was asking. So it's providing them with that practice.
2011, the last year I taught, my AP kids, the number one thing that caused them to lose points on the AP exam was they didn't read the question correctly.
Didn't read the question or stop before the question is at the end. So they're not getting the full question. That's huge.
We've also even had to work on, with the close read activities, I noticed in my classroom that students were answering the questions before they reread the excerpt.
Yes.
And so we had to have a whole practice of, just because you read this last night for homework, we have to reread it again. Those are your directions, and that's what you're focused on. So we have to reread it again. Even if you don't want to reread it again, we have to reread it again. You might think you really know all the content in just those pages, but we want you to read it again. Read the words, because that was showing that they were missing a lot of questions that way because they just weren't reading it. They want to just get through it as fast as possible. So that's been something we're really having to work on.
Are the tests that we're doing, I mean, outside of Class Mojo for the Tennessee State, are they online or are they paper-based for the reading specifically?
Online.
So one of the things that studies are showing is that retention is significantly higher in humans when we read on paper versus reading on a screen. Is there any conversation around making the reading specifically available that way? I know we don't have a lot of control over that. But
Are you asking about Course Mojo in particular?
for what?
Are you asking about Course Mojo in particular?
No, I'm asking about testing. Since we were
state
kinda got on that
testing.
topic.
Yeah.
Testing will never, I mean, the ACT's gone online. It's so expensive to run a paper pencil test. Testing companies have moved. Now, I think that and realistically, I think the testing industry as we know it will be gone in 5 years. I don't think it stands up to this. I mean, a good teacher can tell you where kids struggle in 2 weeks of listening to kids read and talk. The problem is you can't standardize that across a state or across a school district, and that's why we got standardized tests. Everybody knows, I mean, multiple choice testing is the lowest common denominator for testing, but it's the only thing you can run to the kind of scale that we do as a state. So, but I think that these kind of tools actually give you a better measure of where students are, and they will figure out the way to norm that and standardize that across populations, and we'll get, in 5 years, it'll be something that's very much different than what we have right now. And what I like about it is it will come with the ability for teachers and parents to work together to support kids sharing a more common language. And I think that's, because there's nothing more terrifying than when your kids go to high school. I mean, at least for me, and they start doing higher level math. I wish we'd had ChatGPT because it'll teach you calculus. It's pretty good. Way better than me, so I think that's an exciting aspect. And I hate to do this, but we probably need to move on because we got Dose Bros in a few minutes.
We don't want our Dose Bros to get cold.
Adjourn meeting.
So thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I do just want to say real quick, if anybody needs to go to the bathroom, and we're about to move on, go ahead. It's not a voting session. Just got Dr. Langford over here talking. Probably not going to say anything important. So feel free to just joke.
Fair point.
But seriously, I don't want to take a break right here because it'll take us 10 minutes to get back. But if you do need to go, feel free to get up. We're not going to judge you too harshly.
Hey, good use of AI right here. Photos.
Oh yeah, all AI.
Well, this shows exactly where AI's flaws are because almost every word in here is spelled wrong. Yes.
That was a test. I made part of this presentation for a different presentation at 3:30 in the morning the other day. So yeah, I didn't check the spelling on the AI. I wanted to talk. I want to go through this pretty briefly. We've hit a lot of these things before. This was something I actually did throw into ChatGPT, and I typed in all the different problems the world faces today and asked it to create a summary picture of it. And this is what it put together. So I just finished reading about Syria and the collapse of Syria. Israel, Ukraine, AI. Everything else. And it's an amazing world. Like if you're talking about in 5 years, a multi-billion-dollar testing industry could be completely disrupted. That's pretty shocking. Modern warfare has been completely stood on its head. Modern warfare is built around fighting other equipment that costs millions or billions of dollars, and now it's costing Russia $15-20 million to defend $70,000 worth of drones. Everything is changing as a result of it's democratized technology, and it's changing. Amazon will be delivering packages by drone at scale. They're already doing it in some places, but that's coming to scale in the near future. So, in the midst of that, we have to think very strongly about how we approach schooling and how we integrate some of these tools. We want to do it responsibly. I think one of the most interesting things that I see is in any study of AI, the number one topic that's coming up is ethics, responsible use, maintaining humanity, different things like that. And that's going to be the number one thing that we're going to have to focus on. We've spent, last year when I took over as director of schools, one of the things that we identified as a big need was to reconnect or to connect more strongly with our communities. And so I spent a significant amount of time last year. Ms. Skinner and I spoke to around 100 groups, I think, in different communities. I've joked about this before. We spoke to everyone from every chamber and Rotary. I spoke to the widows of Hendersonville First Baptist. Any group that would have us come talk about kids in Sumner County Schools, we came and spoke. I think one of the things that I needed to focus more on last year that I've done a better job this year, although you can ask them in private, they give really good feedback, is how I was working with my cabinet, my team. We have 6,000 employees. We have 10 large departments. We run buses to 9 trips, round trip to Disney every day. We're responsible for millions of square feet of maintenance space. in addition to teaching, making sure kids are safe, making sure kids are fed. It's a massive enterprise that we run here in Sumner County Schools. And, you know, and we have, I mean, you've had presentations from about half of our team. And you see, we've got phenomenal professionals. We'll celebrate, hopefully in a few weeks we'll have another celebration, but Ms. Skinner's actually going next week to Florida to receive a national award for leadership in instruction. So we're proud of her. And most of our people have been recognized at the state or national level for the work that they're doing. But wanting to really hone in, the book that I gave you, The Advantage, is a great book. I love Patrick Lencioni. This is one of my favorite ones of his books. His podcast, if you're not a reader, his podcast on Working Genius and his table group's actually moving to Franklin, Tennessee. So Lencioni will be in this area soon. But I think one of the things you'll see with him is he really stresses the importance of organizational health. He said all teams can get smarter, but it takes a tremendous amount more work to get healthier. And that's one of the things that we've really focused on this year. Like, I didn't think, this was the first time in my leadership career that I moved up in the same building. I'd always gone to a different location to lead. I had worked with my cabinet for 5 years or longer in different, like JJ and I worked together for 10, 15 years. Most of the other cabinet I worked with since I came up here in 2018. But thinking about the transition of me moving into the director role, replacing Dr. Phillips, who was here for 12 years, a lot of transitions that we had to work through to think about what it meant, and the fact that I lead differently than Dr. Phillips. We have many similarities, some distinctive differences. And so trying to process that, and so we used the first question. Lencioni says that organizational health is a function of 4 things: building a cohesive leadership team, creating clarity, reinforcing clarity, and over-communicating clarity. And you'll see that in the book. And the 6 key questions to get organizational clarity, you know, one of the things he says is a lot of times, it's a little bit like you just heard that in that discussion, kids know a lot more than they get on test because they're not clear about what the question's asking. If you don't know what the question's asking, most of the time you're not going to get it right. Same is true in our jobs, is do we know exactly what's being asked of us? And most organizations don't spend a tremendous amount of time asking these questions. They also don't think about, like when my cabinet comes together, one of the things that we work on is when we're in this room, we're one team. I'm not the director of schools, I'm not board community relations, I'm not instruction, I'm not finance. We are one team to make the best decision for Sumner County. That's kind of a different thought process, and most organizations don't do this. Most come in and say, I'm going to fight to the death for positions in transportation, or I'm going to fight to the death for more teachers or more coordinators. How do we sit around together? One of our principals said this in her strategic planning, because last year we emphasized, before we talked about whether they were gaining or losing teachers at their school, positions at their school, we expressed like, hey, we're going to be a lot tighter on giving teaching positions this year because we're trying to do compensation and we've got these big capital projects that we need to do. And she said, after she said, it made it so much easier for me to understand why you were doing what you were doing, because I understood we needed to lift the pay of our employees as high as we could. So I'm going to go through 2 of the questions that we've done. Why do we exist? So my cabinet met for 2 days in July and then another 2 days in October to really kind of hammer out our answers to these questions. Why do we exist? We said Sumner County Schools develops better people to make a better world. We're actually working with the Table Group consultant right now, and he said that one of the greatest things...
Field trip tomorrow, sorry.
Field trips are very important. That one of the most, you know, he said when he's talked to us, he said, we asked him how we were doing, and he said, to be honest, most people in business don't call a consultant until the CEO is about to get fired. So you got to take that into account. But he said, you know, it's nice for me to get a couple of days to work with a group of people that think they can change the world. And I think that I would say that about every member of my team. Everybody wants to see things significantly better for our schools. I would say the same thing about our board. I think our board has always tried to do things to change the world and change the county for the better of our kids. How do we behave? In order to do this, we sat around for about a half day and we brainstormed about the people in Sumner County Schools that we thought were the very best. Your Vincie Barbers, your Renee Spindlers, your Floyd Malones. You know, we went through all the different departments in each school. You could name these at every school. And we said, what traits do they have in common? But not just aspirational. We have some aspirational ones because we don't have 6,000 Vincies. we would be a great organization if we had 6,000 Bensies or Renees. But what traits do they have? And that we think that we possess. And so what we came up with is the core values that we think exist in Sumner County Schools are grit, bought into mission, growth mindset, and humble. Grit is something, if you talk to, especially on my cabinet, if you talk to them and hear their life journey and their story, you'll find out there's not a single person on my cabinet that hasn't overcome significant obstacles in their life. And yet, in spite of that, they have a kindness and a generosity about them that's focused on making things better for our staff and kids. And I celebrate, I'm so fortunate and blessed to have the team that I have. Bought into mission doesn't mean that we all agree on individual decisions or steps on the journey. We actually don't. I think one of the most interesting things in the development of my team is Frankie had worked for me for 5 years, and she knows it's perfectly fine in a meeting to push back, to challenge, because I'm an external processor. Amanda Brown is an external processor. Sometimes we externally process together at the same time.
Very fun to watch.
Hard to follow, but fun to watch. But anyway, that's the part about becoming a team. But I think you would say our best people, and one of the interesting things the consultant pointed out is you should hire by these values. You can teach knowledge, but if you go through everybody that you've hired that's a great employee and everybody that's moved on, if you hired on these values, you would very rarely miss. And our best hires express all of these values. I want to jump now because I don't want to stand. I realize I'm now the only thing standing between us and Dos Pros. And Tom.
Here yet, so.
Okay, good.
We're just gonna wrap it up.
I'm not jumping.
But there are 4 other questions that I didn't share the answer. I'll be happy to share those with you. I had Frankie look at it before, and she thought that if we did the first 2 and then got in, since we'd asked you to think about your why, and that's where we want to close today. I want to run through this. Last year, we talked about. I was able very early to tell you that I think our main budget initiatives are going to be capital and compensation. Mr. Ott's going to bring a compensation report to you in January. Obviously, compensation remains on that list of things that we're going to have to continue to push. I will tell you that I've heard from some of the, one of the managers at Chick-fil-A was complaining that they weren't getting as many people because the schools were hiring them. I thought that was a very good sign. I wish I'd been there. I said my pleasure. But these are some key initiatives that we're talking, and so I'm going to start talking. Jeremy, Chris, Frankie, y'all feel free to jump in at any time if I miss anything. New teacher support. I'm not going to go through all the details because y'all had a great report last month from Dr. Alexander about Teach Sumner. I will tell you that 48.8% of our new teachers this year were job embedded, and that number is only going to grow. Colleges of education, for the most part, are not producing graduates. There's a lot of reasons for this. We have some really strong ones in this area. I think MTSU does a good job. I think Lipscomb does a good job. I think Western Kentucky does a great job. Western Kentucky is the only college of education I know that's stocked with education majors. They have a department that's very intentional about going out and recruiting kids to teach. Increasingly, we're getting a lot of kids. Hunter just hired a kid that is one of my kids I'm really proud of, Logan Neufeld. He went and played football at Lindsey Wilson. He got a COVID year, so he got his MBA, and he's starting in January to teach at Hunter. I think there's a lot of value in getting people that are coming out of different fields into education. We've got retired police detectives from New York City, retired military. I think one of the things that I've talked a little bit to Ms. Brown about, that I'm going to talk to Dr. Alexander about, is building out a program to specifically target veterans. There are a lot of veterans that are finishing their service, and they love being. We had at Veterans Day in White House, we heard a guy speak, and he talked about how he had struggled with PTSD when he came back, but being in a school on a team helped him feel like he was a part, like he did when he was in the military. And that's a good thing. We want to provide that support. We're getting a lot of contacts from people in the industry that are interested in teaching. So what I want to talk about tonight briefly is this question that we're asking now is, what does support look like? So when we ask this question, rather than create new positions, do different things like that, the first thing we say is, how do we better utilize our existing resources? So Ms. Brown started a team. It's got finance, HR, instruction, principals, different people on Frankie's team, and they sit around and they talk about what they're seeing and hearing from our new teachers and specifically our job embedded teachers. And so, you know, one thing we have to do is focus with principals, central office staff about how we support, how our instructional coaches that are in each building support new teachers. Miss Skinner, there will be a growing trend that you'll see through here. For 3 years, she's been pushing to use teacher leaders to support new teachers, and for 3 years I said no, because I thought teacher leaders were used by principals and they would get frustrated if you took that resource away from them. She went ahead this year and did it, and every principal we've talked to said how much they enjoy having that teacher leader time focused on supporting their new teachers. So that's been a really big initiative that we've done this year that's helped provide support. It's going to be something we're going to have to look at in budget time about how we provide support for new teachers. I mentioned earlier expanding programs to veterans. I think measuring engagement and support is a key thing. I'm on the hospital board at Hendersonville, and their HR director, they're focusing extensively on how they found if they can keep someone for 3 years, they keep them for 20. And what they're increasingly finding is there have to be a certain number of contacts the first 3 months, or you never get that opportunity back to build that relationship. So that's something that we're looking at. So we're looking at some formal ways to capture that. Craig, Mr. Ott's looking at that, to measure what their engagement is, how they get support, ways that we can better support them. Ms. Skinner and I are gonna we're gonna try to visit every new teacher in the district in the spring and talk to them and meet with them and ask where they need support and what would help them, and encourage them and thank them for the job that they're doing. Our retention rate is really high. I can't remember, Dr. Alexander shared that number. I want to say it's something like 88%, which is amazing. I taught in an urban district in Atlanta when Teach for America started, and we hemorrhaged those job embedded candidates because they had no support. They just tossed you in the classroom. I remember we had the first one we had taught Latin, and he made it 2 days. And we're like, it's a good thing he didn't teach social studies, because if he couldn't handle a Latin classroom, he'd have never managed world geography. But I think, I mentioned Ms. Brown's monthly tactical meetings where they're actively engaging principals, central office leaders. For instance, like Ms. Wilkinson that works in Ms. Skinner's office, she mentors and works with a lot of new teachers in elementary. Obviously, the workload on an elementary teacher, especially in K2, is really high because they're teaching every subject with very little planning time and building relationships with students and helping manage behavior and everything else. So she's been able to come in very close to the ground and share with the team insight and input. And I think it's really neat because a lot of times your finance people, that's one of the things I want to celebrate our school district, your finance people oftentimes don't have the greatest working knowledge of what's going on the ground with your product. Our finance team is integrally engaged in what we're doing to support new teachers, and I think that's a powerful thing. Do you have any questions about teacher support? Frankie, did I miss anything? Okay. Any questions?
I've just got one. I think the biggest thing that I hear from some teachers is that behavioral support. Is there anything we are planning to look at from either a policy standpoint or you're looking at from your internally?
Yeah, I'll just
help with that?
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I'm expelling kids now if they threaten teachers. Like, if they're, not universally. Like, there are extenuating circumstances, obviously. But I expelled a student a few weeks ago because the student threatened a teacher at one of our high schools, like bodily harm threats. Like, no, we're parting ways. So I think where a lot of the behaviors that we're seeing are in elementary school, and a lot of it is still a function of the lack of socialization during COVID and kids coming to school. It's a huge question. No school district in the United States that I know of has found the one answer to solve that problem. I think it's a whole lot of different things. I think we're going to have to, a big step that we took is we trained every teacher in the county in TCI, which is a way to manage behaviors, de-escalate. It gives teachers language and a common language so that we can coach and support around it. As that gets more integrated, I think we've already seen some decreases in that. It does not, TCIS does not address the extreme behaviors that we're seeing increasingly. And I think, Mr. Lancaster, one of the things we're seeing is this is hitting more in our more suburban schools where they're really high achievement schools, because you've got kids that are struggling academically and behaviorally, and that gap between where they are and where some of their classmates are, that increases the frustration. So, some of the things that we've been talking about is, especially I think with some kindergartners and first graders, we're going to have to set a long-term goal on a full day participation in class. Like, we may start with some kids and they can only do 10 minutes, and then we've got to have support for them to work specifically, not to pull them out and put them someplace else, but to help identify what's causing you to get frustrated and what can we do to help alleviate that, and set the goal that by the end of kindergarten, they're able to sit in a classroom with their peers and not have those behaviors. It's a national question right now, and there are not a lot of great answers because a lot of it's mental health. We have zero mental health support. We have it, but it's so overwhelmed. Like right now, if you're an adult and you want to go to therapy in Sumner County, there are only about 11 therapists that are accepting new patients, and the wait, I want to say it's something like 12 or 13 weeks sometimes, unless it's an emergency. So that's a problem that we're going to have to keep chipping away at. I think we're working on. We've got some teams that are looking at it. I can probably come back. I think it's probably a good thing for us to come back. I can't give the answer today, Mr. Lancaster, because I agree that's a huge thing. But I think we can probably come back in a couple months and lay out a little better, what some of our strategies are, because I do think it's going to be something that we're going to have to address in budget. We're going to think specifically about how we support behavior in schools.
Is there any, I think last year there was some initial discussion with the state about potentially moving that third grade year back to kindergarten. Is there, and the reason I asked that is I know, like you say, some of the behavior with just a maturity standpoint and everything else. Has there been any more?
No, I've asked specifically for first grade. My understanding from our experts are that kids come in at such varying different levels in kindergarten that a lot of times it sorts out, but first grade is probably a better measure because they've had 2 years. If they need to be held back, that's a better, you can at that point begin to delineate whether it's just they haven't been exposed and they're growing versus no, they've got a significant need that needs to be addressed. But I have not heard much talk at the state level about changing that from third grade to first grade.
Okay.
Yeah, Ms. Ross?
I see parent-school partnership on here. I know, from my perception, I'm sure the data supports it, the best PTOs are at the best schools. And one thing when I was going through like the election process and everything, was going and talking to the PTO people, and they all, I know you can't, and they raise money and you can't share money amongst PTOs, but they all had great ideas and were willing to share or help or whatever amongst, I don't know if that would be a good initiative to look into of sharing amongst the PTOs.
Yeah, I think, we've had Station Camp Station Camp Elementary a couple years ago, went to Guild and provided a lot of, what's interesting is we have kind of our really affluent schools, and then we have our title schools have money. There are a group of schools in the middle that they don't have poverty numbers like title, so they don't qualify for title money, but they have significant needs, and it's been a struggle to get PTOs started there. We've tried to address a lot of that with curriculum and making sure that we provide the staffing, but I think that and I think that's where we're intentional about the way that we go around. Like, one of the things I've thought about is it'd be great for me to go around and meet with PTO presidents and just listen to them and throw out some ideas and then bring back ideas here. I've thought about doing that. I just need to figure out how to get that on my schedule because I'd love to have those conversations.
Or even maybe have them, get the presidents together because they had, sharing, clothes and coats and, all these different ideas. And then they weren't doing it, they're doing it. And anyway, that could be a good initiative.
Yeah, no, that's great. Next thing I want to talk about is principal support. We actually, one of our big initiatives right now, we're not quite ready to bring it to press yet. One of our big initiatives is providing clarity to the principal position so that we can better support principals. From time immemorial, this was the pep talk you got when you were named a principal. This was the one I received. You're gonna be principal at White House High School. Stay off the news, don't screw things up, go lead your school. Okay, here are the keys. It took me, when I transitioned up here, it took me 2 or 3 weeks just to walk Dr. Miller. And I mean, when you saw her last month, Dr. Miller's not one that usually needs a whole lot of help with details and taking care of business. She's pretty effective at that. But it took me 2 or 3 weeks just to transfer all the different platforms. And we have more platforms now than we did in 2018. So there are a lot of things. Principals become the bottleneck at schools, not because they're an obstacle, but because all information flows through them. And it's expected that they coordinate everything. So one of the things that we're really working on is clarifying that role, because there's not one type of principal. You know, we think that there are at least 3 different models of the way principals work. You know, you have some principals like, I mean, this is the way I was. Like, I drove everything that happened at White House High School. I went to every ball game. I went to every concert that I could physically make. I got there at 6:30 and stayed till 9 or 10 o'clock. It would have been nice if somebody come in and said, hey, this is not a sustainable path. You can't do all of this and do the instructional leadership in the building. Who are you going to hand some of this stuff off to? The handing it off will be sometimes looking at the building to see how they can better utilize their resources. Sometimes it's going to involve us having discussions about positions and staff that we add to help support them. We are very lean staffed compared to other districts in Sumner County. And we're going to have to ask some of those questions, but we also don't need, I mean, I'll give you a classic example. We've got an elementary school that, by the ratios that we use for assistant principals, qualifies for a second AP next year. Okay, so we were preparing to add that. She's asked to have an additional lead educator instead of an assistant principal. She said, you know, the way that I lead, I prefer to do the IEP meetings and those kind of things. I would rather have somebody that can go out and spend more time with my teachers. We've not done that because we live by ratios, because of state comparability and things like that, but it may be time for us to look at, like, how can we pinpoint support that's needed at the school instead of a principal asking for an apple and we give them an orange. I think that we can get a little bit more nuanced in particular, while still remaining equitable across the district, because we do, like, we're required by state law to remain equitable across schools. I think, you know, targeted support, you know, some of this, Ms. Skinner, Mr. Brown, Mr. Johnson are working on a thing now where they're going to look at all the platforms. Right? We have Tyler, which is our finance and HR software. I don't know if you've ever used a financial software. They're all clunky. They make sense to some people, not everybody. And then Skyward on the back end is that way too. It's 375 clicks to do anything on the back end of Skyward. So what tends to happen is we fall in love with different apps and different platforms because they're easier and more user-friendly to use. Well, the problem is that a principal looks up and they got 8 different places they have to log in. So they're leading work to try to identify and eliminate any duplicative services, not just on apps and things like that, but anything like forms and turning in data. What can we use, you know, what can we do to automate that? Different things like that to remove some of that work from principals. Frankie, did I miss anything?
Well, I was going to share some research behind that. So we're specifically talking about principals as instructional leaders. So if you have a level 5 teacher in a classroom, that gives a student 6 months growth of learning just because they have a level 5 teacher. If you have a level 5 principal in that role, it's 3 months of growth across the entire building. So there's a lot larger impact, even though the months aren't as long. So we're committed to figuring out, like, what is it that makes a good instructional leader? What kind of leader are you, and how do we support you in those things that we think are important for student outcomes? So that's the goal of the principal support. We're really excited about it. Principals are really excited about it. We've never really named, like, what is it that makes a great instructional leader? We have great leaders, so we're going to go from great to excellent. So we're pumped.
And we've spent a significant amount of time gathering feedback. Like Jeremy, I mean, as you know, Jeremy talks to you all a lot. He also talks to, in the course of a week, he probably talks to almost every principal once, some multiple times. Ms. Skinner and I have met 2 times with every principal for 90 minutes this fall. Well, oh yeah, 3 times counting strategic planning, yeah. And then we've met, we're in buildings 2 days a week with some combination. She's with her team one day, we're together one day. And then our cabinet has been together face-to-face during strategic planning, us included, once. So almost everybody on our leadership team has been engaged with principals. And we're out there trying to specifically ask, what do you need? What can we do to better support you? Whether that's capital or stuff, or whether that's personnel, even down to what are the minor problems that are plaguing you that we can try to fix. And I think we've really got a strong culture of principals trusting and sharing what their needs are. As opposed to, like we used to have, when I was a principal, we had an early warning system. It was kind of like NORAD that tracked Santa. If Dale left the central office, back in the old days when Dale ate actual food, he would always go eat barbecue in White House, and we had a source at Perry's Smoking Pig that would alert us that Dr. Phillips was in White House. I think now I'm not going to lie, because I know that they still text if I'm around, but it's interesting. I do think that we're a lot more open and transparent in our communications, and we want to continue to grow that. I'll be happy to talk, and we can talk at dinner about innovative practice and the commitment to give back, because I feel like we've done a lot of that, and you've experienced firsthand innovative practice. I'm really proud of the work that our teams are doing, and let me give a shout out, because I can tell you in most school districts, instruction and technology speak different languages, and sometimes if we go back to the first slide, this more accurately depicts most school districts' relationship between IT and instruction. But our team works really well together once we identify something, because they have which will actually lead into my last thing. We have a huge obligation. AI and the internet and technology offer wonderful opportunities for our kids. It's also dangerous. And Chris's team does a tremendous job of protecting our kids. And so they got to make sure that things are safe for our network and safe for our kids. And they've worked really well together on things like Course Mojo to get that before our kids. But it leads me into parent-school partnership. We believe strongly in our parents and our parents' role in shaping the education of their kids. I believe wholeheartedly that the parent is the chief determiner of what their kid's education looks like. Our board policy reflects it. You can request alternative assignments for anything in the school system, and we will do our very best. And I'll be honest, like a couple years ago, Mary Day Reynolds and her team, the way that they worked with one of our parents to meet that parent's needs, it was impressive. They spent hours and hours and hours. Miss Lanchak did the same thing at Station Camp Middle School. I believe that also that parenting and grandparenting is really hard. We have a lot of grandparents and some great-grandparents that are raising kids. We have foster parents, and they face a huge challenge. And I think that there's stuff that they know, and I think that there's stuff that they don't know. And I think that the role that we can help play, Miss Brown's team does a tremendous job. An area where we're really going to work is how can we help to inform and educate parents, not just about what they're doing in ELA class, but also what are the dangers that we're seeing that kids face. And I want to run around. I did this one time when I was pastoring, and my church referred to it as the time that I gave the church a sex talk. We're not going to get a sex talk, but I want to talk to you about some things I think are really important for us to start emphasizing and talking about. Mental health. We've mentioned it already. Mental health is off the charts for our parents, for our staff, and for our kids. It's going to be something that we've all got to work together to help support each other. Our kids are going through excruciatingly painful things: the death of parents, divorce, abuse, all kinds of different things. Our core group of counselors and social workers and principals and teachers do a tremendous job. My daughter teaches in Bowling Green now. She called last night in tears because one of her students that she's gotten close to is struggling. She said, "I just want to bring her home with me because this is a good kid." That's the people that we have that are working with our kids. Vaping. We've also discovered that in addition to kids vaping a lot, youth sports on Saturdays in our Hendersonville schools, as we've added vape sensors, parents vape a whole lot in our bathrooms.
You have no. So we had we've had obviously basketball going on, but our first games were on Saturday, and it was the reports I got were really funny on Monday. It was mostly parents. It's not really the kids, at least on Saturday. I don't know about otherwise.
Yeah.
So good times.
Yeah. So I think it's decreased vaping among kids. I don't know about parents yet. We're hopeful. It does take a picture of them when they come out of the bathroom. But we know who's doing it. Our vape sensors are actually, there's an addition that's coming where they'll be able to differentiate between THC and regular vapes.
Are those pictures public record?
We're opening on
Can we post them
Facebook.
Anonymously. I don't know how you got them.
We're not saying he was vaping, but he was in the bathroom. We're not sure if it was him or Earl, but one of them was vaping. I think that's a country song. Drugs, we got an ongoing war, not just with our kids, but with our parents. A significant part of our population does not see any problem with marijuana, and that's trickling down to our kids. Gummies, Miss Brown's team has a training on where you look for vapes that we need to push out, or vapes and THC and different things, because the THC vapes are tiny. We were at Beach on Friday. Mr. Powell had a whole bucket full of vapes that they had taken off of kids. That's just going to be an ongoing struggle. I think we need to make parents aware, because the vape pods and stuff cost about $40.
Yeah.
We have kids that are addicted to it. I don't know about you. When I was in high school, there was no habit I could have had that required $40 a week. But we've got to communicate to parents and help them to understand that problem. I want to talk briefly and close with this, and then I think Ms. Skinner, we'll talk about the why while we're eating or something, or maybe a different time. I don't want to really end on a negative, but I want to talk about cell phones. This is going to come in the legislature this year. They're seriously considering banning cell phones in K-12 education. Some districts have already done it. It's been better than they thought it would be. I'm not recommending that yet. I think we have a lot of study to do on that. But I will say here are the concerns. Mental health. It never turns off for kids. They never escape it. Self-worth and self-esteem. I don't know if you know this, you can buy likes. And we have kids that are buying likes to seem more popular with their peers. And we're wiring their brains to tie acceptance and value to likes on social media posts. I will tell you that leads, as kids get older, to more explicit photos and sharing those among each other. Pornography. Let's just hit this in the head. We've had a lot of talk about what we want our kids exposed to. The biggest danger for our kids right now, unregulated cell phone use. I looked up some statistics that said 25% of students now have a cell phone by the age of 10.7. 75% have a cell phone by 12.6. 99% by the age of 15. By 18, 93% of boys and 63% of girls have been exposed to pornography on their phone. First exposure is usually around the age of 12. We live in a sexualized cultural environment. Honestly, it's one of the hardest things for me with my younger daughter, because she's 6 feet tall. And when she was in 4th grade, she no longer fit little kid. We had to make costumes because everything was age inappropriate. Our kids are robbed of their childhood, and we don't allow them to be innocent. And that's a struggle. And the thing that we've got to work with parents is here. We have some 5th graders that are looking at pornography on their phones because they've got an access to the internet with no oversight, no regulation. And for parents that are doing a good job, what it doesn't stop is, hey, look at this. That's something we got to work on. We got to communicate that to kids, and we got to communicate that to parents. They're searching for information about dating and sexual relationships and being instructed on that by pornography. If you think what we talked about earlier about a culture that bends towards likes and value, think about that, what that does to our young boys and girls' self-esteem and self-value. And then lastly, there's all kinds of extensive stuff about the vulnerability that our kids have if they have unfettered access to the internet. Trafficking and attempts to traffic children is growing exponentially when kids have unregulated, and they're hanging out in YouTube chat rooms and game channels. It can be a really innocent game that kids are playing, and they're connected to the online environment. Parents have to constantly, and I don't want to put this burden on parents, we want to help them, support them. Parents have to constantly be asking questions, and I think we need to do our part to help them know the right questions to ask, right? Because most of us believe that our kids would never do that, and I don't think our kids would naturally do that, but I think they can very easily fall into it, and it's terrifying. And we can do better. It's going to be one of the things. We've never looked at our role as a school system to get engaged in those conversations because we think it's more the parent's role. We're not going to replace the parent. Don't hear me to say that. But I think we have to work together to give information to parents and grandparents so they know what to look for. I sit on appeals for discipline hearings all the time, and most of the time the parent or grandparent comes in and says, I have no idea my child was doing this until I got called by the school.
I just want to know, has any of those searches or anything like that, the content stuff, do we have any type of amount of incidents that's happened with the kids?
What's that now?
With the iPads. So every kid has an iPad.
No, our iPads are filtered wherever you are.
I mean, they're filtered. I'm just saying, you don't have any, there's no accounts.
We're pretty quick at swatting it. We cut off chat on YouTube this year because obviously YouTube is a great tool for instruction.
Correct.
But there were some incidents where kids were coming into contact with adults through the chat function.
But not on our device, it was on their own device, but that's how we knew to turn it off on our iPads.
But that's the best way, the best tool that we have, because honestly, I mean, we're always swatting flies, trying to stay ahead. If we had that relationship with parents, just like, you know, when Katie talked about school safety a couple months ago, the number one defense we have is kids come and tell the SRO stuff that's going on. Parents call in it because they built that relationship. If we can have that ongoing communication, it blocks everything major. There are small things sometimes that slip through, but yeah, we're able to brick things. Now, I mean, are teenagers going to innovate and try to find new ways to do things? Absolutely. But I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't want to end on a negative. I just want you to know that that's going to be stuff as we think about what we're focusing on as we move forward. Parent education and support and partnership is a huge thing. I think it's everything from clothing and conversations with PTOs to also putting really good factual information in front of parents to help them ask questions to take care of their kids, because it really does take a partnership. It's what's that?
It's not negative, it's reality.
Yeah.
Well, and to end on a positive, one of the biggest initiatives we've done this year is the Sumner Reads, where we engaged our parents with fluency activities with kids, and so that's an educational way that we've partnered with parents, and so we just want to make sure we're touching the whole child and not just one aspect.
Yeah, we've had parents like send videos of them reading to their kids, and they've thanked our principals and stuff for saying, like, thanks for sending it home. I know I'm reading and working with my kids on the right skills. And I think we've got to eat.
Food's here. Let's roll.
One last thing, are we getting any feedback from students about not just like them coming to the counselor and saying, I'm struggling with an eating disorder? Like, do we have any type of panel, or do we have any type of way legally to get, I'm just being real, like I've got 8 high school guys that work for me. If I ask those 8 right now what they're really struggling with, they're going to give me 8 different answers.
Yeah, I think most of that now, we're limited in what we ask on surveys, because I think we're in a time where parents are real concerned about what questions we're asking in surveys, and those are anonymous anyway. I think like one of our high schools, Dr. Miller was here last month, she does a survey with kids and asks them, their question is, do you feel supported? Who supports you? And how do they support you? It's been really good for them because they've been able to identify some of the best supporters were first, second, third year teachers, and the kids gave very specific feedback, and they were able to share that with the faculty. Like, hey, if you just say hi or fist bump or something.
And they call it feedback forms because they know which kid's filling out the feedback, so they can actually talk to them about what they said.
Yeah.
Food's up in the gym. We can continue this discussion in line.
And we're coming back down here.
Come back out here. Board meetings.
Oh, that's right.
We gotta roll. It's 5:20.